Hi, this is Jean Joe, broker and owner of Perisson Real Estate, and thank you for joining us again for this week of Perisson Pulse. I'm going to be going into in a bit, I'm going to be sharing something that we had at one of my networking meetings. Ron Ricard of IPX 1031 came and shared what's been going on in the world of 1031s and the trends that he's seeing. And there's some interesting ones. So even if you think you know what a 1031 is, hold on for that discussion. Before I launch into that, I did want to go into a few different things, other things. I was able to attend the CAR, the California Association of Realtors business meetings last week. And in particular, of interest for me was the MLS, the Multiple Listing Service section, because I am actually part of the board, our local MLS board here. With that, they covered a few different topics, and one in that I found in particular interest was the segment where we're talking about accessibility in terms of the MLS and finding ways to be able to make the MLS more available more useful for people who have different disabilities. I like the way that it was titled. It's actually differently abled people. So being able to things like having included in the MLS stuff like fields like, are the countertops lower so they're more accessible, the hallways or the doorways being more, again, wider so that if you had a wheelchair, you could get through. For single family homes, maybe even though it's only one level, there may be some stairs that you need to get into that level. And so is there a ramp? And if so, what kind of a ramp? And so there's actually a task force that's working on that. And I think that's really exciting. One of the people that I'm a fan of, Karen Trolin, she was serving on the MLS board with me before and mentored me in terms of finance. And she's actually heading up that committee. And since being in MLS, she's actually gotten to where she's had some health issues and is now in a wheelchair. And she was sharing how there are things that she never thought about until she got into a wheelchair. And now she's realizing, now that she's seeing all of that, she has this passion. And I just love the fact that she's taking what is a setback for her personally to be able to serve others and make it so that our MLS is more accessible so that people can actually search for maybe the specific features that they need without having to go visit every single house and finding out that it's not going to work for them. So that's exciting on the front for MLS. And there are a few other things, but that was one that I wanted to point out. Second, I did want to talk about the Repeal the Death Tax Initiative. That has to do with the Prop 19 inheritance portion, where if a parent or whoever if a party passes away, then their heirs may have the property reassessed. So if it was the parent's primary residence and it becomes a child's primary residence, then they can keep the property tax as it is. With $1 million exemption. So a little bit of calculation, and we've done seminars on that before. The other piece of that is all other investment properties would be completely assessed. The Harwood Jarvis Taxpayer Association, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association has been trying to get that repealed and made an attempt last year with a petition that didn't gather enough signatures. And then the California legislature also has a possibility of has the option to be able to put it on the ballot. And they chose last fall not to do so. So the HJTA went again to try to get those petitions out and to get more petitions signed. They did need 875,000 and only ended up with about 560,000, which is not bad, but it's definitely not the amount needed to get on the November ballot. I will be following up with them, and in future videos, I'm hoping to invite one of the HJTA folks to join us and talk about a little bit in terms of what their plans are for the future. But I just wanted to give an update because I know that there are some people that I've been talking to, and even on Nextdoor, we've been talking about this, and I have clients who have been very negatively impacted by this piece of Prop 19. So there's that. And then thirdly, I did want to make sure that to highlight again our real estate and finance in the golden years seminar. So if you haven't heard me talk about it yet, I'm going to keep talking about it because I'm really excited about that. Next Wednesday will be our first session, which is transitioning to your next home. This has to do with if you have a primary residence and you're thinking about downsizing to a smaller home or upsizing to a bigger home or even relocating to a different area. What are the different considerations? So with that, we're going to be featuring Elsie Wu, who will join us as and to talk about bridge loans, which is one way that you can finance that whole process and make it easier for you. I was also able to have a booth at the Millbrae Lunar New Year Festival this past weekend on Sunday. It was originally scheduled for Saturday, but because of the weather, it was all postponed to Sunday. And it was actually a really beautiful day. Weather was perfect all the way up until about 2 o'clock. But by that time, I was already out of my stuff that I had brought. So I did bring about a little over 1,000 little red envelopes with chocolate coins in them and good wishes for the new year, and was able to pass those out and able to meet a lot of people. So really enjoyed that. And then finally, before I do go into my other feature, I did want to bring up again, I have my shredding party, my ever popular shredding party on May 11th. So if you haven't signed up yet, please make sure to do so. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share a video. I've edited out different portions, but I wanted to share portions of a session that we had with Ron Ricard, who is part of 1031, IPX 1031. Ron is actually going to be one of our speakers for a seminar in March, and he is just he's been doing 1031s for decades and has a lot of experience, a wealth of experience. And I know sometimes people are like, well, I've done 1031 exchanges before, and they think that they know what it's all about, but there are so many different facets to it. For those of you who don't know, a 1031 exchange has to do with the IRS code. I believe it's IRS code 1031, but it's where you can actually sell an investment property. It would have to be real estate. A real estate investment property that you're able to sell that and then purchase a new one. So that's why it's called the exchange, and be able to defer your capital gains taxes. And this could theoretically, you could exchange and exchange and exchange. Ron has said in the past, you swap until you drop. So you literally, it's not that you're getting rid of the taxes completely, but that you're actually just deferring them, and you can keep exchanging until the point where if you just decide you want to get out of it, you sell everything and you pay the capital gains at that time. And possibly at that time, that's okay, because maybe your income will be reduced. So the capital gains will not be as much. Or you just keep swapping until you drop and until you pass away. And at that point, then now your heirs have the step-up basis and all of that. So that's the whole basis behind the 1031 exchange. We have done seminars on that in the past. And so you can just search on our channel for the 1031 exchange portions. But I like to ask Ron to just jump in. I host a networking group of other agents, very top producing agents in the area. And I'd like to just have him join us and let us talk to us about what he's seeing in the real estate market in terms of the exchanges. And he talks about different things like areas, different types of property, what are the trends that he's seeing. So I'm going to share a little bit of that, and I hope you enjoy.
I'm doing a lot of exchanges right now. February is actually one of my, usually January, February is my slow time of the year. January was terrible, but February's been fantastic. I mean, it's, people are doing business right now, and it's, so I'm very optimistic, especially once rates do come down a little bit. I think second half of this year is going to be absolutely gangbusters when it comes to investment real estate. So I'm cautiously optimistic things are going to definitely going to get better. So the reality is, during the COVID years, 21, 22, until the rates spiked up, we had record numbers. I mean, like double my best years ever. It was amazing numbers of people doing exchanges. They came down, but compared to how bad commercial real estate is, everyone's talking about how bad commercial real estate is. Retail's dead. Office buildings are even deader. But we're still doing the business, and so yeah, very optimistic. I think it'll look pretty good.
And what type of business are you seeing? What are you seeing people exchange from into?
It's
there a
everything.
trend?
We're still seeing a little bit of people exchanging into things like triple net retail, not as much. Lee and I were talking earlier about DSTs. A lot of people are retiring and wanting to get out of active real estate management and so going into DSTs. That's pretty big right now. You're seeing a lot of people plan. And this is where they want to go. In fact, I just got an email from somebody. We did an exchange for her a couple of years ago. She bought a bunch of properties out in Bakersfield. Now she wants to retire to Florida, so she wants to exchange her Bakersfield properties to Florida, so that in 3 years she can then retire and move to Florida. So we're seeing a lot of people doing that kind of advanced planning. Buying in areas where they're going to move to, or buying properties themselves that they plan to move into in the future. So that's a big trend right now. We're seeing people do. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you exchange into a DST if that's what you do?
Yes.
Yeah. So for just DST is Delaware Statutory Trust. It's fractional ownership of commercial real estate, and for us, it is a replacement property. So whether they buy a house in San Mateo or a shopping center in Texas or a DST, for us, it is just a replacement property. So yeah, it's no different than any other kind of real estate as far as the 1031 is concerned.
And you can exchange out of it too, so.
Right.
Because it's limited term.
Yeah, once the properties go full cycle, usually every 4 to 8 years, the properties are sold, and that's usually when I get a bunch of phone calls. It's not uncommon for me to get 6, 8, 10 phone calls from when a property is being sold. Now they're wanting to do another exchange again, either to another DST. Sometimes they're cashing out. Sometimes they're exchanging back into regular real estate. Usually they just go back into another DST though, just because they like the pocketbook money and not having to actively manage real estate.
What's the rollover cost when you go from one DST to another?
From an exchange point of view, it's just the cost of the exchange. $1,000 on the sale, $250 on the purchase. One of the big negatives about DSTs is that they do have a fairly high upfront cost because you're paying the broker up front. So I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like probably 8 to 10% total that you're paying to get into these properties. So when the property's rolling over, there's a small fee on the sale side, but you're getting there's a higher fee getting in on the entry side.
It's built into the purchase
But it's built in the purchase price, exactly. So if you put in $1 million of equity, even though you may only be getting, I'm just making up numbers, 900 of actual real estate, your return is based on the full $1 million of equity. And so when they quote a return, it's quoted on the total amount of equity you're putting into the property. Even though some of it is going towards costs and expenses.
And we did have one DST company on before. We'll probably get some more on in the future because it's a big thing that people are doing.
If you haven't had somebody to come here and talk about
We
DSTs, I do recommend it because for a lot of brokers, I still remember. True story. When this whole market started back in 2002, I was brand new to the exchange world, brand new. IRS had just issued the first, on how to do these. And one guy came in to talk to, down in Los Gatos, 120 agents at their big tour meeting. And I just, honest to God, thought they were going to tar feather the guy. They basically nobody got it. Nobody got what the value is of that kind of a market for realtors. I thought they were going to kill it. I came up to them afterwards and said, we're going to be best friends, and we did dozens and dozens of deals together over the years. But a lot of realtors don't get it because they think, I'm not getting paid on the DST side, why would I do it? And the reality is you're doing it because nobody's going to sell that property. They're not going to sell that property unless they have an exit strategy. Exactly. When we talk about exit strategies, we talk about, what are you going to do with that money? And paying taxes is not the best exit strategy for most people, and so they want to exchange into something that's just less management. And not everybody can afford to buy a McDonald's or a Walgreens or a Jack in the Box or something that's a big triple net property. So these DSTs are a niche that allow people to actually sell their property. So it helps you get the listing in many cases. So I do recommend that you have that just as part of your a part of your portfolio. Another reason people will use them also is as a filler. I got a client right now. She's selling in Belmont, buying in Portola Valley, I think, but she's buying $200,000 less. And so she's gonna use the DFT for the filler.
Yeah.
So they don't have the boot.
Yeah, it's so, and having the, is a Delaware statutory trust,
Yeah.
is basically fractional interest in large commercial properties. Typically, they're $50 to $100 million properties that they sell in fractions. And one of the advantages to them also, a lot of people when they're seniors, they don't have a lot of income, so they have a hard time qualifying for a loan. So the nice thing about DSTs also for seniors is that they come with a set amount of debt to them. So $100 of equity you're putting in might get you anywhere from $70 to $110 of allocated debt. So it actually replaces the debt for a lot of people when they go into these properties as well. So
Aren't the fees pretty high on those?
the fees are high, and the biggest negative is liquidity.
Yeah.
I mean, I just had a woman, actually, it was a guy called me yesterday. He was working, he's selling property for his cousin. His cousin is literally dying. And but they need money from the house to sale to help her care. So they wanted to do an exchange. She actually qualifies for the primary residence exemption, so she only moved out 2 years ago. So she was going to keep it. They were going to keep the 250 and put the rest into a DST. And I go, well, how many heirs are there? They go, 8. I go, well, the problem is if she dies within a year, which is what he was telling me, they're going to have to wait 8 years to get that money because the money's not liquid. And they go, yeah, so it's just not worth it. It's just that lack of liquidity for some people. It's not a problem. For some people, it's a big problem. But a lot of people will pitch the DSTs as kind of a parking lot. I'll just put it in there, and in a year it'll fall. So the market's going to come down, and I'll be able to get out and buy what I really want. No, you won't. It's not a liquid asset, and that's really the biggest negative to them.
And it's locked up for how long? 8 years?
Whatever
4 to
the
8
term
years
of-
is your typical rollover period. Usually the loans are 10-year loans. They're 30-year amortized, but due in 10. And one of the things about DSTs is you cannot refinance. So they want to get out before that 10-year mark. So 10 years is really, really, really the outside. 4 to 8 is a kind of a typical time. I've seen less, but usually not. I rarely see more than 7 or 8 years. Or we have another big run up. I had some properties that were sold within 2 years because they had such a run up in value. They go, hey, let's sell it now. We get a great return on the asset, and now so if the market runs up, you'll see it usually sold sooner.
In the DST, there is another option for sooner liquidity by going into a REIT.
Yeah, you may have heard people talk about 721s.
Yeah.
What a 721 is, 721 just refers to a section of the tax code, just like 1031 is a section of the tax code. 721 is a contribution. Let's say that Lee and I go buy a piece of real estate together. After a few years, we should really own this in a partnership. And so we create an LLC or partnership, and then we contribute our shares into a partnership. That's referred to as section 721 of the tax code. You're contributing into a partnership. What some companies are doing is they are buying a property through a DST. So all of us together buy this DST property through a DST with the expectation that 18 to 24 months later, they will then contribute everybody's share into the partnership that not only owns this property, but a bunch of other properties. So they're effectively contributing into a REIT.
Real estate investment trust.
Real estate investment trust, yeah. So when people say, can you exchange into a REIT? The answer is no. You
Yeah.
can't, because a REIT is not considered to be direct ownership of real estate. But you can exchange into something that later gets converted into a REIT. And that's often when you hear people talk about 721 exchanges, that's what they're referring to. For us, we're still exchanging into a DST. Ultimately, though, you're exchanging, that will be then converted into a REIT. The big negative is that very high cost. I mean, we're talking like almost 20% in some cases.
Wow.
But more importantly, it's a one-way street.
You can exchange out of
You can't
that.
exchange out of it. 'Cause once you're in REIT, now you own shares of an entity. That's not direct ownership of real estate. And if you ever want to sell it, you're paying taxes. It's a great strategy for a lot of people who are much older, like 85 or older, where with the expectation is, I just want to do this once. I don't need the money. When I die, my kids will be able to sell the shares on a stepped-up basis, and we don't have to worry about it. Legally speaking, yes, you can sell it. The problem is there's no secondary market for that. There's no formal secondary market. So if you own a DST and you're saying, you know what, I got to put my grandkid through college. I need the money right now. Technically, you can't sell it. Usually, the people you're going to initially look for are the other owners of that DST. Hey, does anybody need want to buy more of the property? And the property is a well-functioning property. You'll probably see somebody buy it from you, but you're probably going to sell it at a discount. And especially since it's very difficult to value property like that in the middle of the transaction or in the middle of the ownership cycle. So technically, yes, you can sell it. It's just you're not going to get full market value.
Just in general about 1031 exchanges, the last time we talked about it, you said people were exchanging back into the Bay Area. Are you seeing that still?
Yeah, they did exchanges in places like Las Vegas or Idaho without the expectations. Okay, prices are going to go up, rents are going to go up. The problem is in those markets, nobody makes more than $50,000 a year, so rents do not move. I had a period of about 9 months where like every third exchange was to Idaho, and all of a sudden dead stop, because prices went so high up that funny story. Do you know where people from Idaho are moving to? South Dakota.
Where did you?
Because there's so many Californians now in Idaho, they can't afford to live there anymore.
Oh, those
and
Californians.
prices have gone up.
Mess
No,
up
rents
everything.
haven't gone up at all. And so because of that, we're seeing a lot of people exchange back to where they're comfortable. Where they can see their real estate. And yeah, it's not uncommon right now. I'm doing an exchange for a woman. She's selling up her property, 2 rentals, one in LA, one in Texas, to buy a house in the Bay Area that ultimately she wants to move back into. Okay, so there's a common misconception in exchanges that you have to sell exactly like you buy. And that's not exactly true. The key is it has to be the same taxpayer. So Greg and his trust are the same taxpayer because your trust is not a tax reporting entity. So you and your trust are the same taxpayer. So there's a very common misconception that has to be the same. No. It's like on the lending side, for many years, I know it's not the case as much anymore, but lenders would not lend to trusts. So when you sold in the trust, you had to buy your own name because the lender wouldn't go. That's okay because you're the same taxpayer. So, but where it becomes an issue is when you own property with other people, you own it often in a partnership or LLC or some entity. Now, one thing to note is that an LLC is not a tax reporting entity. In an LLC, you have a choice. You can either have it taxed as a corporation, you can have it taxed as a partnership, which is the vast majority, or if it's solely owned by one person or a married couple in California, then it can be taxed at the individual level. So when somebody is buying a commercial property, for example, the lender often does not want to lend to the individual, they want to lend to an LLC. Well, as long as it's one person or a married couple living in California, then they can actually create the LLC, have it be disregarded, and that's still like you or your trust owning the property, so that's okay. So, but most people who own the property in an LLC own it with other people, it's taxed as a partnership. So the LLC actually files a tax return, and everybody gets K1s who owns that property. So when that property is sold, LLC sells, who has to buy? LLC has to buy. The problem we have is people hate each other. They now want to go their own separate ways. That's a problem. Now, if it's 10 of us and we just want to want to get rid of Greg, then what we do is we just deed out Greg for his 10% share of the property in the LLC as itself. The rest of us keep happily going into the next property. Well, that's fine as long as we want to stay together in the LLC or partnership going to the next property. The problem is if we all want to go our own separate ways, now we got a problem because now we can't. Because what a lot of accountants will say, well, that's okay. We'll just break it into tenants in common and then sell the property that way. Well, you can't because the IRS calls that a step transaction. They say basically you broke up the partnership solely so that each individual can do an exchange out of it, and they would disallow the exchange based on that, based on your intent. If you have people in that situation who you think ultimately, yes, we are going to want to get out of this property, that's exactly it. Well, then let's prep for it. Let's season the property as individuals. Break it up, put it as tenants in common, show it now individually on our own tax return for 1 or 2 years, depending on what their accountant says. And then now, when each one sells, we can go their own separate ways. The issue here is if you do it in the same tax year, it shows up on the 1065 partnership tax return as basically pointing a smoking gun at you. And so it's so that you at least want to wait a separate tax year so you don't have to basically self-report that you did this. So, but yeah, so I always say with enough planning, you can get almost anything done.
Right.
Couple things people mentioned ADUs. Right now, pretty much anywhere from Los Gatos all the way up through San Mateo County, ADUs are becoming a huge topic. Please remember when you talk to people who have an ADU or a rentable basement, because some of you were talking about having a space that's separate. If they ask the question, how are they treating that property on their taxes? Because if they're renting out the ADU or the basement and they're actually showing a percentage of the property on their tax return as a rental property, they could do an exchange with that percentage of the sales price. And when we're talking $2, $3, $4 million properties, you know, you're guaranteed that exemption, meaning that their gain on the property is way above that $500,000 exemption. And because that's going to be part of that, it's going to be way above that $500,000 exemption. You know, if they can take 20% of the sales price and do an exchange with it because they have a rentable ADU on the property or a rental basement or something like that, it's absolutely worth asking that question for them, because in a lot of situations, you know, they'll be able to save a lot more tax than they think. Yeah. By the way, I note also this works for you as agents if you have a home office. If you're showing a percentage of your house as home office, whatever, when you sell that property, assuming your house is your gain is more than the exemption, then you probably want to look at doing an exchange for whatever percentage of the property you're treating as your home office. You could think, sorry.
So with that situation with the ADU in the exchange, what requirements does the replacement property have to have in order to satisfy the exchange?
Okay, so real simple. You're selling a $3 million property, 20% of it is ADU. Now mind you, that percentage is determined by the client's tax person, not you, not me, right? Their tax person. Because it should be reflective of how they show on a tax return. But if that's the case, so the property sells for $3 million, 20% of that is $600,000. So now basically they have $600,000. Where do you do that? Well, technically you can do a couple things. You can go buy a standalone piece of investment real estate for $600,000. Technically, could you also exchange it to another dual use property? Yeah, you could. That's I've done this for a lot of realtors where they sell a house, you know, I'll say 10% is their home office. They just go buy a bigger house, 10% of that's their home office. Then they're exchanging back into another dual use property. But it's a full standalone exchange for whatever that percentage of the sales price is. We are doing right now a record number of reverse exchanges.
Oh,
Okay.
And so I want to make sure that you know that this is part of what's available. 95+% of exchanges are regular. You sell, then you buy. There is, though, a way that if somebody finds a property they want to buy, that they can buy it before they sell their property. And right now, I probably am setting up 3 to 4 a week of these things, which is a stupid number of them. And they're all the same thing. I know I can sell my property anytime because there's no inventory where I am, but where I want to buy, there's no inventory either. And therefore, I want to find that property, and the seller's not going to wait, not going to give me a contingent offer, accept a contingent offer for me to sell that property. So I need to buy this one first.
What are the fees now?
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot more.
So a few things to know about when it comes to reverse exchanges. One, they exist. Number two, please don't buy that property and then call me, because I'll hang up on you. Because if they buy that property, they now own both. And you can't do an exchange into a property if you already own it. So we actually take title to the property. Now, we can structure it a couple different ways. The most common one, which I'll talk about, is we take title to the property being purchased. So they come into escrow with $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever, to buy that property. We then will buy this property using their money and hold it until they sell their property. Couple things. Number one is, yes, this is a more expensive transaction. Whereas a regular exchange, 1-for-1 is $1,250. That kind of a transaction is going to cost you $7,000 to $10,000. Now that sounds like a lot, but when we're talking a $2 million property, extra $5,000 ain't nothing. So now if it's commercial, it can be even more. It's more expensive. But the other thing, the biggest issue with a reverse exchange is the financing. Commercial lender, regular Yeah.
Turned one down last week, that would have been a big, nice loan, but we can't do them because
Right.
we can't lend to somebody that's our borrower.
Exactly, because they're lending to not just us, they're lending to a shell LLC that we're creating. So,
So that's where LC comes in, the bridge loan.
yeah, so that's, the
That's where she does
vast
a lot.
majority of the time, we're talking bridge loans. Actually, the vast majority of the time, people have the cash, which still blows me away. But a lot of times, people will access that cash by borrowing against their primary residence, or borrowing against other real estate or other assets that they have. So that's a very common way people will access it if they don't have all the money up front. So again, just note it exists. These could take up to 2 weeks to set up. They're much more involved than a regular exchange. But it is something that we do see right now, just because of where it's funny, every market is different. Some places right now, they got a ton of inventory, prices are dropping, but most of what's in the Bay Area and Northern California, that ain't the case anymore. So that's why right now these reverses are becoming a way for people to get what they want and not have to worry about it.
So that's it for this edition of Perisson Pulse. I hope you found that to be very interesting and helpful for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Definitely, if you have, I hope that if you haven't already, that you will sign up for our seminars, one or all of our upcoming seminars, as well as make sure to join us for our shredding party in May, because that's always a fun time. I don't have time to talk I can't talk because the trucks are so loud. They're shredding on site, but I hope to see many of you in person at any of our seminars or the shredding party. And if you're thinking about selling or buying real estate, or if you know anybody who is, please keep us in mind. Thank you very much and have a great weekend.